What they did was they said every one person that you have stopped maybe having a pressure ulcer, that you've prevented that pressure ulcer, or that you've reduced the harm from that fall, that's one person and their family that you have impacted positively.
In this, our 27th episode of the Walk and Talk Improvement podcast, we have two incredible guests. Susan O'Reilly, an Assistant Director of Nursing for Dementia Quality Improvement for HSE Dublin and Midlands, and Dr. Rob Cunney, a Consultant Microbiologist and QI Clinical Audit Lead at Children's Health Ireland. My name is Juanita Gaidra, a Programme Manager with the National Quality and Patient Safety, and it's a pleasure to welcome both Susan and Rob as our guests today. So welcome to you both.
Thanks, Juanita.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here, and we've been talking about this for a while, so I'm delighted that this is happening. And I know the breadth of experience that you both have is phenomenal. And I wanted to start on that a little bit. What draws you to quality improvement? Why is it so important to you?
I really have to credit our former CEO here in CHI Temple Street, Mona Baker, who pushed me somewhat unwillingly, I have to admit at the time, into doing a QI course and getting involved in improvement work. I very distinctly remember I had this kind of road to Damascus moment, standing in the day ward in Temple Street and doing some simple ethnography, as I now know it is called, which is basically observing.
Yes.
And I'd had this sudden realization, wow, this stuff actually works. This actually delivers change. It was such a simple moment, but it was a huge revelation for me. And that just then got me interested and sort of hungry for more. And that's what started me off down the QI journey.
There's nothing like that sense of, yes, yeah, actually, this is worth an investment of my time.
Yeah.
And Susan, what about yourself?
Much the same. I think oftentimes we are drawn into things. It's not a conscious decision to go into it, but that you're kind of drawn into it. Where I first came really involved in QI was when I was part of the lead for the dementia pathways for people living with dementia. So it was then that I had that graw for making a difference in terms of the care experience for people living with dementia and their families. But I could then see that small changes could make a huge difference. And it was really then, it was also what drew me to it was that it wasn't change for the sake of change.
Yeah.
It was actually, as Rob had said, this could actually make an impact. So it's that you were identifying problems, you were trying to understand what was going on for people, but then you were actually looking to see, well, actually, how can I measure this? So that was a big piece for me, that I was actually measuring the impact. Because I think oftentimes, and I've been nursing for quite some time, and oftentimes you can put in improvements, but you forget actually that you have to measure them and that you have to measure the impact of it. So I think that was my road to Damascus moment, was when I actually realized, actually, when I measure it, I can actually prove that it works and that all of those small little changes actually build up to a big impact, not only for people living with dementia and their families, but also for staff, because I think that staff go in and they want to do a good job. And oftentimes they can be overwhelmed by the complexity of delivering healthcare. Whereas this gives them structure and tools to be able to see that what they're doing actually works and that you can actually achieve improvement. So I think that's what drew me to it.
Yeah, just thinking about that piece there, as you said, sometimes people can be overwhelmed. There's so much going on. How do you prioritize that? Actually, yeah, I need to put time into this. If I was to ask you that question, how did you get people involved? So say, for example, that Falls Collaborative or that project that you were working on with dementia patients, how did you get people involved in that?
Yeah, well, I think there's a number of different ways that people get involved in it. I think sometimes the phrase voluntold is used. So sometimes people are actually told that they have to be involved in the collaborative or they have to be involved in an initiative. But actually, those are the people who really actually make the most impact, because they come into it probably not knowing what their impact is going to be. But actually, once they start doing the change project, they can actually see that they're making a big difference. So I think it's actually those small little changes, celebrating those small little wins, because when people start to see, actually, yeah, this is making an impact on people's lives, then it starts to be meaningful for them. I also think that a piece that we really focused on in both of the collaborative and in the dementia care pathways was actually telling the story behind the data. So we had the data, but we also told a story about how impactful this was on people's lives. So it was about actually telling that story, then reaching the hearts and minds of staff in order for them to be able to see that they are really impacting on the care experiences of people and that they can really make a meaningful impact on how we deliver care to people living with dementia.
I would completely agree with those points. How do you bring people into the fold? The key thing is it's working with the willing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So get the people who are the kind of the early adopters, the ones who are already showing interest, get them involved first.
Yeah.
As you said, make it real, make sure that people see the outputs from it. And then it's about building a network or building a movement. And that's certainly been my experience. You bring people together, we want to address a particular issue. Let's say it's medication, falls prevention, whatever it might be. Sometimes you say, oh, I'd love to have this person, love that person, and I can't really get them.
Yeah.
But you get people who are interested. And then out of that, and because one of the things that the learnings you often get from liberating structures is it helps you to identify who are the early adopters, who are the ones who are interested in this particular aspect of the problem. I've certainly seen that. They're then the ones who will go and sort of say, okay, oh, I want to do something about this. I want to get involved in the QI project.
Yeah.
And then they bring in others. You have to almost set up a sort of a chain reaction in terms of networking, and then to be there to provide support to say, there's other things we can do here, or there's other ways we can support you to keep that chain going.
I love that concept of working with the willing. I remember years ago working on a pressure ulcer collaborative, but that idea of inviting the unusual suspect, as it was at the time, they'd looked at the experts around the room, and you had the few that had been voluntold and were there and sort of weren't really sure in some instances why they were there, or it wasn't the top of the priority list because they'd so much else going on.
Yeah.
But there was one gentleman, he was a porter. His mother had had a pressure ulcer, and he was so passionate about it, and he was so knowledgeable about it. But his enthusiasm, you could see it, it was infectious. It inspired some of those people. And that, I think, was the piece, that piece that you talked about, Susan, that sometimes the story tells itself. There was something about that story really capturing our interest.
Yeah.
And also our motivation, because I think you're much more motivated when you have that person there that sort of says, well, actually, this makes a difference. This shaped someone's experience in a really different way. So there was something about that.
Yeah.
That's really critical. Obviously, in QI, we talk about measurement and data for improvement all the time. And as Susan said, it is absolutely critical. The old adage that, you can't change what you can't measure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's critical, but I would kind of almost say that you need a small d for your data, but a big S for your story.
Yeah.
Well, I like that.
In terms of making sense of it. I have found that when you have somebody in the room with the lived experience, and also one of the really nice things about liberating structures is, there's a clue in the name, it liberates people to share.
Yeah.
And it creates this safe space for people to actually share their experience and for others to learn from that.
I really like that idea of the small d for data, the capital S for story.
Yeah.
There's something for me when I think of data, often, I know definitely when I started off my quality improvement work, I was too busy. Just get on with the work, get the work done, move on to the next thing, keep going. And that piece about putting the time into doing the data, I didn't value it enough. And there was that piece then that you sort of read a paper somewhere and you go, oh my gosh, that was very similar to what we did and we didn't tell the story. But I also didn't realize the value of it from the perspective of encouraging other people to be part of it, or showing the value of the time that people had put into something.
Yeah.
Because like that, I was too busy doing. Is that your experience as well? When you're under pressure and you're sort of saying to people, no, we want you to fill in this, safety card. We want you to fill in this here. How do you make the case for doing that work?
Well, I totally agree with that. Oftentimes, and as I was saying, that sometimes we don't even realize that we're actually doing quality improvement because we're so busy doing it. It's so important then, that measurement piece. And actually on one of the sites for the Falls and Pressure Ulcer Collaborative, what they did was they actually made the data up to date and visual for staff so that they could actually see on a day-to-day basis how they were doing. So they weren't waiting for data to come quarterly. They were actually seeing it day-to-day. But also what they did was, again, that big S for the story, what they did was they said every one person that you have stopped maybe having a pressure ulcer, that you've prevented that pressure ulcer, or that you've reduced the harm from that fall, that's one person and their family that you have impacted positively. And I think in healthcare, we have a great privilege to be able to do that, to impact positively on people's lives. And actually, it showed staff how they could do that. But then they were coming in and they were looking for the data and they were saying, well, actually, isn't it great? And they were celebrating. We've so many days without a fall, or we've so many days without a pressure ulcer. But they were celebrating that. But they were celebrating it not only for themselves, but also for the people that they had enhanced their care experience and enhanced their care outcomes.
Yeah.
So I think that's a huge piece. Yeah.
Yeah, the person and their family. There's a huge impact from a family perspective.
Yeah.
Somebody might need to take time off work. There's additional pressures in terms of getting somebody else in, arranging a public health nurse visit and navigating that. It's not just that person themselves. That really struck me as you were talking about that.
Yeah.
One example that I was sort of thinking of in terms of data versus story piece is that QI project that I was involved with around antimicrobial prescribing. For the data part, for our data for improvement, just as Susan has described, one of the key things was we wanted some sort of measurement that was quick so that everybody was actually seeing an update of the data on a weekly basis. It was very simple. It was quite crude in a lot of ways. We would literally draw it on a whiteboard at the Monday morning handover meeting. I would be drawing this freehand. If the graph went up, I would hear my colleagues behind me going, hey! Or if it went down, they'd be going, oh. So there was this active participation in the data itself.
Yeah.
So rather than just saying, well, there you go, we then used a very simple liberating structure, which is the impromptu networking, to allow the prescribers in the room to come up with their own stories behind the data. So in some ways, you now suddenly have a room full of storytellers. It's not that you need to gather every single one of those stories. The key thing is that those stories are happening and spreading within the group, and it's fostering that frontline ownership, which is ultimately what we really wanted to get out of that project.
Yeah, and it's relatively quick as well.
And it's essential.
It is essential. I think there's a piece for me as well about it doesn't have to be fancy and it doesn't have to detract from patient care. It needs to be relatively immediate, enough to keep us motivated and keep us going, but not so much that actually we're spending 5 hours in an office filling in a chart with the ruler, down to the nth degree. That's actually detracting from other things that we need to do.
I was thinking as you were saying that there's another challenge of quality improvement, is that when things maybe aren't going the way that we had wanted them to go and the way that we had planned, is actually keeping that momentum up. And I think actually, as you were saying, Rob, there, that the liberating structures can really help that, because you're not only seeing the data, but you're actually seeing those stories, and that each one of those stories relate to a person that you have positively impacted. So that actually, I think, really helps to sustain that momentum when things maybe aren't going the way that you had wanted them to go.
Yeah, exactly. You're absolutely right. And you're kind of alluding to this at the start as well, around the fact that, we are all so busy and we work in a very complex environment. And here are a suite of tools that you can use very quickly without having to have formal training or experience. You can tailor them to a specific clinical scenario or a particular problem and build them into existing structures.
Yeah.
But I also think that from using liberating structures, first of all, you gain a degree of sort of reassurance of knowing that if things are not quite going according to plan, we've got a way of navigating that.
Yeah.
That's it.
But I also think they teach you a bit of humility, because in terms of realizing, actually, things rarely go according to plan. Certainly, I think pretty much every QI project I've ever been involved with, what came out at the end bore very little resemblance to what we thought we were going to get at the beginning.
Yeah.
Using liberating structures familiarizes you with the concept of complexity and the importance of resilience in the face of complexity, but also gives you a way of navigating it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like that word humility. What comes to my mind there is, like the likes of impromptu networking, it taps into the wisdom in the room, and that shared storytelling prompts an opportunity to sort of say, well, actually, oh my gosh, have you thought about this? Or, oh, did you know Mary over there? I talked to her earlier on and she's doing this in her work. And that in itself, I think, is hugely beneficial, because when we're looking at complexity, in particular in healthcare, we need to rely on others and that knowledge because we don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
There is something about that I think is very freeing in being able to say, I don't have all the answers, but actually I'm surrounded by a very wise group of people and somebody here might be able to direct me and collectively we might be able to figure something out.
Yeah.
And we've moved a little bit into that conversation about the tools that you're using in your work. And I know in particular, I'm very passionate about liberating structures and we will talk about that. But what tools do support you in your work? Is there anything that you found really helpful?
From my perspective, I was coming from perspective of using maybe PDSA cycles, but I'd no real structure to it. So I found actually that the quality improvement toolkit and guidelines really, really helpful, because what that did is if you were starting off and you weren't sure where to begin or what to do, who to collaborate with, how to do it, or even that troubleshooting piece that you were talking about, Rob, actually it gave you really good guidelines and it was set out in a very user-friendly way and even had worksheets that you could use to guide you in the journey. I felt that that was really, really useful. And in line with that, the National QPS team were also really good for that support and guidance as well. But I think the toolkit just gave you really good tools, but also that you could share with the rest of the group. I don't think that any quality improvement, as you said, Juanita, it can't be one person. It has to be a team. It has to be collaborative, and that you aren't necessarily the expert in that, and that it actually helps you to realize that, understand who you do need to collaborate with, whether they're willing or whether they're the voluntold. It's about getting all of those people on board and a part of that project. And I found the toolkit really useful in that regard. And even just in terms of those run charts, so that we can see over time that actually things are changing, because it's not just my word, it's actually, this is the evidence to show it. But also another piece that I found really useful was timelines to show actually what we have achieved. Because as I said before, oftentimes we're so busy doing. I've often gone out to sites, particularly as part of that Falls and Pressure Also Collaborative, and people say, well, I haven't really done anything. But then when you sit down and you talk about what they've actually done, they've achieved so much, but they're just not thinking in that frame of mind. People think that they have to do everything now, whereas it's those little small tests of change.
The other thing as well that I found over the years is that people sometimes don't perceive the tasks that they're doing as part of that work.
Yeah.
They don't see it. And actually some of the conversations that they've had, getting people together in a room on the same day at the same time, that's really important to even start the conversation.
Yeah.
And people say, no, we didn't do A, B and C. But actually, when you start to unpick what you did do,
Yeah.
those conversations, the time that went into that, and that toolkit, it's a phenomenal resource. It's available on the website and it's free to download. It's really, really easy to access it. What it does is it makes some of those tools accessible. I'm the type of person, every time I do a run chart, I have to go back and look at the instructions because no matter how many times I do it, it's not my forte. But the other thing as well is that there are templates there that allow you to put your data in and it will give you your run chart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that I think is helpful to know if you're not familiar with it, but knowing how to interpret it and having that data there. But even the PDSA cycle, the information on doing a stakeholder analysis, all of that sort of stuff is in that toolkit.
Yeah, and actually, Susan, your example there reminds me of an experience that I had and from which I got a lot of learning. So this was probably kind of the first big QI project that I was driving myself. And one of the things was we were looking to get, set up our kind of our data for improvement. And we kind of, myself and a pharmacist who was working on this with me, and we were looking at, okay, can we get automated data extracts from the ED system? Well, we tried that and that didn't work. And then, okay, well, let's see what else we can do. Oh, yeah, well, actually, there's an admission list, and can we cross-check that with the patient information system? Well, we were looking at all these digital solutions to try and pull out our data. And ultimately, we ended up doing this much cruder thing of we sort of say, let's go to the wards and find the first 10 kids who've come in through ED and start on antibiotics. And I remember going to my mentor at the time, who's well known to both of you, but basically we would meet up for an hour and we'd spend about 50 minutes talking about music and about 10 minutes going through the QI project at the end. I gave him this list of woes of things that, I've been trying this and that didn't work, and then we tried this and that didn't work, and then we tried this. I haven't even got to the first PDSA cycle. And he was going like, you've just described 4 PDSA cycles.
Yeah.
yeah.
Welcome to the world of QI.
Yeah.
To me, there were 3 key things there. One is exactly as you've said, Susan, is that you may already be doing QI, you're just not aware of it. The second was the importance of having the phone a friend, of having somebody you can go to bounce things off. And I think it comes back to your point again about this requiring a team. And the third thing that really brought home to me is that don't automatically reach for the high-tech solution, that oftentimes the low-tech solution is the one that will work. It may not look as pretty. And we also discovered the sort of bonus learning I got from this was because in order to get our data, we actually had to go to the wards and ask who'd been starting antibiotics. We picked up lots of additional data, lots more sort of rich information that we wouldn't have had if we'd just been looking at an Excel sheet extracted from an IT system.
And it's those relationships, isn't it?
Yeah. You're building your relationships, but also understanding the problem. So are we actually fixing the right problem?
Yes.
That's a huge issue with quality improvement work. I had a conversation there that's totally changed my perception of what we're trying to do.
That, I think, is one of the key things that I've learned from my time in QI, but also from my interest in using liberating structures and complexity and so forth, is that famous quotation from Einstein of if he had a problem that he needed to find a solution for and his life depended on the answer and he had an hour to find the answer, he would spend the first 55 minutes working out what exactly is the question.
Yeah.
That's something I think we all learn from once we started getting involved in QI. But it's great that we say within liberating structures that, depending on the particular scale of the problem you're dealing with or the type of groups that you're dealing with, there are very straightforward tools we can use, like, say, the 9 whys tool, which is, very, very simple. You channel your inner toddler and just keep asking why. And it's amazing how it can strip things back and really give you an understanding of, actually, maybe the problem as we've defined it is not actually the real problem here. There's actually something else underpinning it. And then there's others like agreement certainty matrix that, again, will allow you to understand the nature of the various challenges or problems you're dealing with and where they fit in that sort of, is it sort of simple, complicated, complex, chaotic?
Yeah.
And from that, you can then sort of say, well, there's actually other tools then that we can use depending on where that is sitting. And again, I think that's an important thing with QI, that we have this amazing suite of tools. The trick is knowing which tool to use in which situation.
Yeah.
And I think the likes of the agreement certainty matrix, the big plus for that, in my mind, is helping you identify what's the best way to tackle this problem.
Yeah.
Is it a complex problem that requires a lot of engagement and conversation, or is it something that this is a simple policy and we do the work? So one of the questions we get asked a lot is, well, how broad does my engagement need to be? And there's no point in engaging on something. There's a very clear solution. It's not really something you need to have a big 6-month process on. Just do it. And other things then will require a much more conversational approach.
The 9 whys is one that I would use quite regularly as well. And I think that it's so useful sometimes in its ability to almost make people feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because they're having to reflect and they're having to challenge themselves to actually, why is this important and why am I doing it? So I think that was one that we had found really useful, and people actually found it meaningful because they were able to actually say, well, actually, this is why this is important. They were able to explain it because I think, again, sometimes we're so busy doing that we actually don't reflect on what we're doing. So I thought that was a really good liberating structure to allow that to happen. But another thing that actually was really powerful in what you were saying was the importance of that lived experience and actually understanding what matters to people.
Yeah.
And that actually that's a key part of that collaboration as well, is actually how do we involve the people who we are supporting and caring for in those quality improvement initiatives. And one of them that really kind of stuck out for me was when we were developing, as part of the dementia pathways, a getting to know what matters to me document for people living with dementia who would come into the acute care who may not be able to maybe verbalise their wishes or routines. So their families would complete the document And staff would be able to know key things about the person, things that upset them, things that distressed them, things that they liked, disliked, things like that. But again, going back to the data piece, because there's different kinds of data. You've got your quantitative and your qualitative. But we asked staff and family members actually what they felt was the benefit of this. And really what they felt was the physical doing of tasks was a given, but actually that what was a marker for them of quality care was people going that step further and actually knowing and engaging with the person. But also that staff felt that they now had tools that they could use to support the person without going down the first line of medication. So it was really, really valuable linking in with staff and the families and the people who are living with dementia to understand actually what matters to them and what they see, exactly what we've said before, what they see as being the issue and what they see as being quality care.
Yeah, I've seen it myself in practice. I remember years ago as a patient, there was a lady in a bed beside me who had dementia, and there was a staff member kept coming in and kept calling her Hun. Well, Hun, are you getting on well? Are you going okay, Hun? How things go? And she just, she was getting more and more aggressive. You couldn't figure it out. And I'm not, I'm Mrs. with it. She knew herself. But if they'd had a document like that where the family could have said, call her by her name, she was getting more and more aggressive. And the automatic response is, oh gosh, we need to maybe look at her medication. But it was the engagement. It was the manner in which the person who was trying to, create a relationship, I'm sure, with her.
Yeah, it wasn't in any way malicious.
Not at all. But it was understanding what was important. That was the important thing for her.
Yeah. We then used that information to adapt that tool. So it was actually part of the PDSA cycle to do that and adapt that tool so that we could make it more user friendly. But it was invaluable to have that lived experience of it in order to be able to do that.
Looking at the work that you're doing at the minute, are you using liberating structures? And if you are, how are you using them?
Yeah, I am. QI is something that we would do very regularly in relation to dementia improvement. And I suppose in terms of environment, we would use them. I think one that I would use quite often, and actually I've adapted it, it's called the 15%, but I actually even made it only 10%. 10%, yeah. So we're even bringing it down a little bit. But I think, again, as we've mentioned about that complexity, how you can feel so overwhelmed by the amount of work that you can do, but also thinking, well, actually, what's in my circle of influence to be able to change and what's within my circle of influence to be able to improve. So that 10%, everybody can do 10%. So it's actually getting them to think about what they can do within their 10%. So that small little change. And I found that really useful. And people have come up then with ideas that are even more ambitious, but they're thinking, well, okay, going to start small and build on it. And that's been really, really useful.
What I love about the 15%, or in your case, the 10% solutions, is it allows you to have a conversation with somebody that you might be working with or somebody else to help you unpick it a little bit more. The bit for me is being able to target, if you have limited time and you have 2 or 3 options available in terms of things you might be able to do, what's the thing that's going to have the most impact?
Yeah.
And starting with that and saying, what is the bit here that I can do that is going to have the most impact? I'm a firm believer that we need to look sometimes at our list of tasks and say, can I control it? Can I influence it? Is it beyond my control?
Yeah.
And if it's beyond your control, let it go. But I'm also fascinated. Sometimes we've used a TRIZ. 2 people might look at the same problem. And one person, very similar circumstances, will say, I can influence that. And another person will say, no, I can't do anything about that.
Yeah.
So the power of the conversation and saying, well, actually, no, maybe I think we could do something about that. And beginning a conversation can help change people's engagement with a problem or a challenge.
It is that power of the conversation, though, isn't it? And actually people realising what they can do without becoming overwhelmed by what they might like to do.
That's it. Keeping it manageable, picking something that say, okay, this is what I'm going to focus on at the moment. Okay, what could we do next? And I think collectively as well, that broader, when the team is having a conversation, you begin to sort of say, well, actually, okay, well, you're working on that. I can work on this. We can share it out a little bit more.
Yeah.
Rob, what about yourself? Are you using any at the moment?
Yeah, I kind of reach for my Liberating Structures app or the book or the website, or still can sometimes be very old-fashioned and use the Liberating Structures card deck.
Okay.
I use them a lot for teaching purposes, with, say, large group teaching sessions, rather than standing up and giving a didactic lecture.
Yeah.
I use 1, 2, 4 all for the group to identify, well, what are the topics we want to cover. So, and again, it gives the group ownership, and it raises the energy level in the room so that hopefully they won't fall asleep. Organizational level work around identifying priorities for quality and safety and across the organization, and particularly, again, using things, the kind of simple ones like the sort of impromptu networking to start the conversation going, but then using things like, say, crowdsourcing to get it down to more concrete ideas to identify sort of priorities for the organization. I've used it for team building and team project planning, particularly using things like, say, purpose to practice. And again, a lot of that revolves around understanding the question using things like 9 whys to really kind of delve into the why we're doing things rather than going straight for the what.
Yeah.
And obviously, I use them to support QI projects. And there it tends to be a dipping into the menu. It's more like tapas than all you can eat. Where you're sort of saying, well, actually,
smorgasbord.
Yeah, it's maybe this one would be more appropriate, is what we need to use here. And sometimes it's a case of saying, well, actually, maybe we need to do something other than liberating structures here. Maybe there's some other approaches we need to use.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And then finally, I use them personally, for my own personal development planning and for reflective purposes. I find them really powerful in that they're a way of sifting through the weeds and seeing the patterns and ultimately understanding, okay, what are my priorities and things in terms of things I need to do, but also highlighting what are my priorities in terms of the things I need to stop doing.
That's it, yeah.
Eco-cycle planning is one that I would use for that regularly, where I look at my work because, you can have lots of new ideas, but what am I actually going to stop? What am I going to let go? And we're not very good at letting go. I've met people and they've moved roles, but they're still helping out with something there because they have the knowledge around that system.
Yeah.
We're not very good at stopping a process. So I've seen people, we'll introduce a new form, but we'll still complete the old one because, it's always helpful to have 2 copies. And sometimes it can be, but actually it isn't an effective change if you're just doubling your work.
Yeah.
There has to be that conversation to say, what are we actually going to let go? What are we going to stop doing? Have liberating structures changed how you work? Have they changed how you engage with people? I might know the answer already, but I'll ask the question.
As the short answer is yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to hazard a guess and say, is it the same for you, Susan?
Yeah, definitely the same for me. And I think exactly what you're saying, Rob, from a practical and a professional point of view, but also from a personal point of view, because it helps you sift through certain things. I actually find the 9 whys, even though it can be a little bit uncomfortable because you're kind of thinking, I'm after investing so much in this idea. And now I'm actually realizing that it doesn't really matter to anybody because I keep on asking the 9 whys. It's great. And I love having that toolkit. And I love having that smorgasbord that I can go back to. I feel as if I'm at the beginning of my journey with liberating structures. I still find the website really, really useful because it gives you guidelines on actually how to do it.
Yeah.
It does everything for you. And then you can adapt it as you need it within your practice setting or for yourself. What I love about it as well is that even though it gives you those structures, it's given you the possibility of shifting how you relate to other people. And actually a recognition, the experts around you, whether they are experts with lived experience or experts from their professional practice, that they actually have so much to give and that they will make sure that whatever quality improvement initiative you're engaging in will actually be successful because it's how you drive that. They'll be the drivers and they'll be the owners of it. But it's through that engagement with the liberating structures that you actually get that buy-in and that ownership from them. So I think definitely it has impacted both personally and professionally.
Okay. What about yourself, Rob?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with all the things you've said, Susan, that certainly I found that using liberating structures has given me a much greater appreciation of using a sort of a systems view of problems, of understanding the role of complexity in systems. As we talked about earlier, of working on defining the problem rather than jumping to the obvious solution. It's led me off into other areas as well. It's led me into things like human factors and ergonomics.
Yes.
It's also led me into some of the behavioral sciences and to know enough to be able to say, I'm not an expert in human factors, I'm not an expert in behavioral science, but I kind of have a sense now of when I need to call in those experts.
Yeah.
Because again, these are disciplines that, again, have this very similar ethos to them in terms of understanding the system, understanding interactions before jumping to solutions. And ultimately, as you've encapsulated very nicely, Susan, is the importance of understanding the wisdom of the crowd. That old saying that every person you ever meet knows something that you don't. In the past, I would have thought, well, that's a nice quote. I now see the reality of that.
Okay. If you're thinking of your quality improvement work in the broadest of contexts, and you could be thinking about your liberating structures use, but also understanding what the culture is in the system, how do we change the culture so that it is a culture of continuous improvement? What advice would you have for people that are in that space and that they're trying to make a difference at the moment?
I think it comes down to three things. I would say, give it a go.
Yeah.
Find a mentor and build a team. Those are the key steps to it. I mean, there are tools and supports there. I mean, we've already mentioned things like the Liberating Structures website, there's a Liberating Structures book, which basically has everything that's on the website. But if you're like me and you like to have something physical that you can actually underline and color in and so and there are things like there's a Liberating Structures card deck, and then there's the various workshops and meetups that happen, and there's online groups, the Q community special interest group, which is really good, and you get to try these things out, albeit in a virtual environment.
Practice them safely, yeah.
And there's various people out there who are more than willing to answer questions. There's a really good support network for trying these things out.
Yeah.
The sort of East London Foundation Trust in the UK are recognised as world leaders in quality improvement. And they made the point that they started with 3 people, that you had 3 people who were interested and it built up from there. And that seems to be the magic number. So don't just phone a friend, phone 2 friends.
Yeah.
It's not that you need to go off and become experts in this. Juanita, you and I often talk about the gateway liberating structures, things like impromptu networking, 1-2-4 all. They're very straightforward. Start with those and just try them out.
Yeah.
That's the key.
I think there's sometimes a fear there that I have to be an expert. And in particular, if I'm doing something in front of my colleagues or my peers, the fear that I'll be judged or the fear that I won't do it well and that I need to get an expert facilitator in. And that's not the case. I think there's a piece here about being open and saying, okay, we have a problem. We're going to work together on it. This is a way. And often I don't say I'm doing a liberating structure until after the fact. We just get on with the work and then we say, this is the approach that we're using. And then you can unpick it and you can share it with others and so on. But I think you don't want to appear to be the expert because none of us, we're not experts.
Yeah.
There is something about just taking it and going with it. I really like that. And I really think it's important. You touched on it there, Rob, about having a mentor and mentorship support and somebody that you can pick up the phone to say, listen, I'm thinking about this. Have you any experience of using it? Have you any other thoughts? Do you think this is the best one for this mix?
Yeah.
And even just to reassure you sometimes, say, you are on the right track. Keep going. It's really helpful to you in the work. And Susan, what about yourself? What advice would you have for people?
Just as Rob had started there, give it a go, because I think you're absolutely right. And I know, Juanita, we would have had conversations where, particularly when we were doing the Falls and Pressure Ulcer Collaborative, where we'd be ringing saying, well, actually, we need you to come in and do this session with the staff.
Yeah.
And you'd say, well, actually, let's work and see how you can do this session. So I think having that mentoring piece was really, really useful. I love the fact of having a toolkit because I think when you're starting off, it's great because it helps you to build your confidence. And really, that's what it's about. But also, I think what liberating structures does that is oftentimes absent is the whole thing of having a bit of fun.
Yeah.
And allowing people to have that bit of fun, because it's when they're relaxed and having that fun that they become the most innovative and creative. So I think it's having that openness or being open also to the wisdom of the crowd. And exactly as you've said, not expecting yourself to be the expert in everything, but it's trial and error. And even when I was using them in teaching, where actually it didn't really work, and you'd be kind of saying, well, okay, I might have to adapt that another day or use a different one. But it's actually allowing that to happen because it's that trial and error piece. I think in terms of starting off in QI, I would definitely be saying have that toolkit, have the mentor, I think is a great idea, because then you have somebody who you can call. And I'm sure Juanita would say there was times when we were calling maybe too much, but it was great to have that mentorship and great to have somebody to kind of bounce ideas off. So I think definitely doing that. But also I would say we talked about collaboration and we talked about the team, minding your team and minding yourself, and being okay with maybe ambiguity and the fact that it's messy and things might not be working out the way that you had planned. I'd say definitely that, but also starting small and having that story behind those small changes, because that's really what makes the big change. So that's really, if I was starting off, that would be my advice.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you're alluding to there, a lot of these, they're quite different to the way that we often do things. In healthcare, we tend to use very kind of linear approaches.
Yeah.
And, the liberating structures are often fun. A lot of them have that sort of elements of gamification within them.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, I work in a children's hospital where you bump into clowns and musicians and face painters and, victorious hurling teams on a daily basis. But to me, liberating structures are a great way of supporting that concept of joy at work.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this, that you can actually interpret that phrase, joy at work, in two ways. So the first is that it is bringing joy into the workplace and sort of saying it's okay to actually have fun. I mean, there's a serious output. There's a serious reason for doing this. But this is a way of actually bringing joy, of raising energy, of energizing and empowering people. And that's a good thing to do. But you can also interpret it as this is leveraging joy. So in other words, it's joy at work in the sense of it's joy delivering something as a result. And I think this helps to feed the sort of the energy levels and the enthusiasm, and helps to be able to show people you can get something out of this. This is worth giving a go, and bringing more people on board as a result.
There's something for me about when you talk about joy at work, often we're dealing with very serious topics. It's not necessarily all that we're having a great laugh. It's not that, but sometimes the joy for me is that process was really efficient.
Yeah.
Instead of spending 5 hours in a meeting, we got that done in an hour, and it's much more robust, and everyone contributed.
Yep.
Yeah.
There was an equity in the process.
It's so true. And actually, we had mentioned it earlier, right at the beginning, where we were saying actually how staff became engaged with the process of actually making the improvement work. And how, Rob, you were saying when the line went up, everybody was going, yay!
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when the line went down, everybody's going, oh, so I think it's that. So there can be, and people work really hard to deliver a health service that they want to be proud of, and that they feel that their service users and families are proud of. That's part of the joy of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's the part that you get really excited about.
That's the bit.
Coming back to what Susan mentioned earlier on, is the fact that, that we talk about the term liberating structures, but the likelihood is that if you're having a go at any sort of improvement, you're probably using liberating structures in some way, shape or form. You just don't realize it. And it is important to look at exactly how they are structured. They're not a free-for-all. They're not just ways of just open or unstructured brainstorming. There is a logic to them. There's a reason why they have the specific structures.
Yeah.
Completely.
They're easy to use, but my advice would be give them a go, but do go through the stuff on the website first so you understand not just what it is you're doing, but why you're doing. As you said, Juanita, you don't have to tell people we are doing a thing called a liberating structure and this one is called impromptu networking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just go for it. But at least if you're facilitating it, do have an understanding of how the structure works.
And I do share that at the end of it, because I think it's helpful for people to know as well that this is a process. I didn't dream it up in my head. There's a process there. It's accessible, that when you go off and you go to your team or you're working and you're doing something, that you can take it and you can use it. Because I think there is a piece for me about the more accessible this is to people, the more the dynamic of how we work will change. And I think that's a fundamental piece. I think there's something really, really important in that this is something that anybody can do. And I would say trusting the process, starting and trusting. As you said, Rob, there's a 5-step process with them. You're following it step by step. And the website is fabulous in the sense it'll tell you you might tweak it here or change it here, or this is something to look out for, and this might not work for you.
Yeah.
But equally, I would say to you, if you find that something isn't working, like I've tried things and I've said, actually that wasn't the best one on the day. Would there have been a different one that I could use, or a different method or a different approach? And going back to the group and keeping in check with the group and finding out what is their need, what do they need, what do they think is the important conversation to have. And there have been times when I've been working with a group where we've stopped after, a piece of work and said, okay, well, look, are we on track? Is this getting us where we need to go? And being able to adapt in the room to sort of say, well, actually, they're saying that this is the key priority. What works best now to have that conversation? And sometimes it's just a conversation. You can't beat a conversation, in particular if there's a cup of tea.
Yeah.
You can't beat an actual conversation. But I think some of the conversations we have, you can talk and talk and talk. We need a structure sometimes to help us get to the action. What's the action we're going to take out of this? And what's the action that's going to be best suited to the culture in the area that we're in, and the organisational dynamics, and the fact that maybe we've so many people on sick leave or so many people on annual leave, and how do we navigate for the system we're working in versus the ideal? And I think that they allow us to do that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And I'd also say that the structure of it, as you're both alluding to, almost gives you an out from that piece. You're not in any way saying that it's not important, but what you're doing is you're concentrating on actually what matters.
Yeah.
So you're giving yourself that structure to be able to do that. And I have to say, I am definitely 100% not an expert in it, but I think it's giving it a go and it's doing the reading around it. It's definitely worth it.
Do either of you have a mantra that you'd like to share?
Well, in terms of QI, my mantra would be, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So it's just doing that small bits.
My mantra on this is, this isn't going to kill me. It's like,
Please, God.
seriously, what's the worst that could happen? If it doesn't work, maybe my ego gets a bit bruised, but
You'll live to tell the tale
yeah, exactly.
and survive.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all learning. And I think that's the bit, is every intervention, everything that you do, it's learning. It gives you more information.
Yeah.
That's it. That's the whole purpose.
Yeah.
You have to test it. You have to try it.
It's not that you win or you lose. You're the winner, you learn.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah. Well, look, I think that's powerful words from both of you to leave us with. Just to say thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As we come to the end of this episode of the Walk and Talk Improvement podcast, we would like to thank both Rob and Susan for sharing their wisdom and experience so willingly. It has been such a privilege to speak with them on this topic. For you as a listener, we hope their insights will continue to inspire you in your work to improve health and social care services. We hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you would like to hear more content like this, you can listen to the Walk and Talk Improvement podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening.